So now that we've talked about these mechanical effects, spheres, N8, the like, I want to talk about designing paradigms. This is perhaps one of the most important parts of learning how to play mage. Because a paradigm isn't just a simple set of statements of I believe. It is also the structure of how your mage views the world, how they see interactions, how they see conflicts. Paradigm is what is exactly what it means. Your paradigm is how you view the world as a whole and as individual parts, but it's also how you view interacting with it. Paradigms influence, should influence, and will influence your foci, the way you do magic. For instance, it would be very unusual to see a celestial chorister undertaking an ecstatic experience using drugs and pleasures of the flesh, the way the cult of ecstasy often does. It would be very unusual to see an aboriginal dream speaker more fully embrace this idea of formula and archaic book learning over listening to the spirits of your ancestors. Now, it happens. It can happen. If you think about it, it's the ultimate way the paradigms start melding. But within that paradigm, you also have to come up with foci. Every sphere you have has a different focus. And you have to use those foci in order to affect those spheres using your N8. So, you have to start putting things together based on your paradigm. If you're playing a verbena mage, and you adhere to the old ways of druidism, it's very unlikely you're going to use, say, a voltmeter as a focus for forces. It's much more likely you're going to use actual flame, or you're going to use something like an Atham, something like that. It's going to fit more in your paradigm. And you might use completely different foci than the mage next to you, but both of you get the same effect, because that's the nature of the magic. It throws out the idea that there is a universal way to do things and says, no, we each have an approach. And if we do it correctly, it'll work. The other fun thing is as you go up N8, at certain levels, you start to erase foci. You've become enlightened enough to the point where you don't need them anymore. Especially in spheres that you have great accomplishment in. You understand them to the point where you realize it's not necessary. Now you can still use them. And using them can help lower the difficulty to perform your magical roles, which we're going to get into in the next video. But they become unnecessary. You see, before that, you have to have them in order to do your magic. If you do not have those foci, you can't do the magic. It's because your rudimentary understanding, your beginning understanding is so tied to it that you think that item is necessary in order to perform the magic. You start to dissociate yourself from that belief. You become more enlightened. You realize that while you don't need it, it can still be beneficial. This is why I say there's a lot more thought that goes into mage. There is. That's not to say that your vampire or werewolf or changeling characters can't be just as equally deep and interested, but mage kind of requires it. It's also why I say mage isn't a game for everyone. Not everyone wants to put in that much thought, and that's fine. I understand that completely. Sometimes you just want to play the game to play the game, to escape for a little while. You're not interested in the deeper, darker story. And that's saying among the World of Darkness games, which are already deeper, darker stories. But you have to take this into consideration when creating your mage. Let's say you make a backwoods Appalachia down home country boy. Or even better, the bayous of New Orleans, Louisiana. So, you're country folk. Let's say that the verbena path is going to fit you best. And you start to take spheres. Now, life is the primary sphere for the verbena. So perhaps for you, that's going to take the form of cooking utensils, because you were always taught that food nurtures the soul as well as the body. So food's something important to you. So all of a sudden that wooden spoon your granny gave you when she passed on, the one that her mama gave her, that becomes like a magic wand to you. And that may sound silly, but really it's not, because it's the investiture of your belief that that food is nurturing the body. But then let's say you also put some dots in entropy. Now, given that it's New Orleans, you know that fate quite often is seen as something frivolous, something that just happens. Oh, that gonna happen to you, sir. You never know. Maybe that fate turn on you. So, perhaps for you, it's a deck of cards. And you have to accept the card that's drawn. Maybe if you botch a roll using fate magic, the card you draw is low. Maybe it's a 3. Something that ain't gonna matter much in a game of cards, share. And that's how you do this. You start putting that together. So perhaps you're doing a fate to effect to start altering a few little things. And your character starts shuffling his cards. And he pulls out a card. You roll your dice. Say you get 4 successes. Pretty impressive, say, because you only rolled 2 dice and you got some 10s. Well, all of a sudden, you pull you an ace. And entropy. Very happy with the approach that you gave. Blesses you. That's how this works. That's the creativity of this system. But that's the thought you have to put into it. You have to understand what's going on. Pretty neat, huh?